It'll be useful for us to review the chart, which I just posted again on the Fabrengen post, and you guys have it here, right? To understand this machlokes between Beis Shammai, this dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So we need to know the following information. First of all, just a general piece of introductory information. In halacha, there's two levels of halacha. Deiraisa, a Torah scriptural obligation, and then there is midrabanan and rabbinic obligations or rabbinic law, which is often, it has many dimensions, rabbinic law, but often it is additional laws that the sages enacted to safeguard the original scriptural law. So that's one thing we need to bear in mind. Okay, now we have to bear in mind, or now study this chart again, look at the chart, and we'll review it again so we understand the two, but in more detail, three categories of how a flow from the uterus is defined. There's nida and there is ziva. That's in general. Nida means the natural cycle, of which on average it's more or less a month. But we'll soon see that halachically it's narrower than that. But just understand that the nida is the natural monthly cycle, the healthy cycle. The ziva, which means flow, there's also zov for a male. There's a male flow, which have the same laws. We speak now about the ziva. So this is a flow that happens not during the expected natural cycle, and that's called the ziva or a zova. In the zova itself, there are two categories: a minor zova and a major zova. A zova ktana and a zova gdoila. A zova ktana is a flow. Again, it's all during the not expected days. We'll soon define that. Of either 1 day or 2 days. That renders her a minor zova. If she has a flow for 3 days, she's rendered a zova gedola, a major zova. Let's go back now, as far as the Torah law is concerned. And as I'm saying it, you're familiar with practical halacha. It's not the way we observe it at all, because for the reasons I was going to tell you. But the Torah law basically is this: that a nida, there's no waiting 7 days for a nida. Once the flow is over, so then at the end of that, she it's a minimum 7 days, but that's all. It's a minimum of 7 days, but there's no waiting the clean days. She immerses in the mikveh and relations resume. She's tahira. That's how a nida becomes pure. How does a minor zova become pure? A minor zova becomes pure by ascertaining that 1 day, she had a flow on 1 day. So she waits a day to see if there's no longer any flow. She goes to the mikveh, she's pure. Same thing applies if she had a 2-day flow, or a 1 day and a break, and then another day and a break. Same thing. At the end of the 2nd day, she waits a 3rd day. Well, now will be a 4th day if she had a flow, a break. It's one of two things. Either she has, actually 3, 1 day flow, or 2 consecutive day flows, or even 1 day break, 2 day break, but not 3 days in a row. She immerses the end of the mikveh. The zova gedola, the major zova, who has a 3-day flow, that's what the Torah says. She has to wait 7 clean days and then immerse in the mikveh. As you can see, nowadays we've combined it all. Nowadays we simply, for reasons for confusion, and Jewish women adopted this voluntarily during the hardship of exile to keep the calculations, etc. So everything is treated with the stringencies of both. So any flow at any time, it's actually an extra stringency. There's a 5-day wait. It's another reason we'll go into it. Then there's 5 days, no matter how short that flow was, And then she waits 7 clean days, and then she immerses in the mikveh. Okay, what's important now are the days, the time factors here. So if you look at the chart, you can see there. Let's look at the nidus. We're going to go across, going to go horizontal. So in the course of the month, which days are designated the natural days? It starts from the first time she had a period. So then it goes from there. So day 1 to day 7, if any blood comes during that time, it's the halachic status of nida, not of zova. And then it resumes again anytime after day 18. So there's 11 days in between. There's 11 days in between where she could become a minor zova or a major zova. Clear? Even though normally it'll be a month later, but our sages say it's possible. It's still part of the natural order that after day 18 of the first menstrual flow, there'll be another natural menstrual flow. That's still part of nidus. How long does the tumah last? Minimum of 7 days. So how many days does she have to count before she can immerse herself? The sea, days to be counted, 7 days. Now those 7 days are either she's bleeding or without. It could be, again, 1 day flow, 2 day, it doesn't matter, she's got to wait the 7 days. And then providing the bleeding stop before nightfall, she goes, it could stop just before nightfall, checks herself, no more blood, that night she goes to the mikveh. There's no clean days at all. Just ascertain, discerning that the blood flow is stopped. And she tefillah only, all she requires is going to the mikveh. Clear? Yeah? So what we need to remember now, for our purposes really, what's critical is the day, the time frame. So if I ask you, when is it possible for her to be a zova? It's from day what to day what? Sorry? Speak up. So you have it's 11-day period between day 7 and day 18. It's 11 days, which we clear. We're revisiting that again. Okay, let's look at zivus. So you can see that there's a zova ktana, a minor one, and a major one. Our sages determine that's the human. It's still possible to be in the realm of a very short cycle. It's not average, but it's still possible. It's a physical thing, and it's still part of the natural cycle, rather than zova is considered something, not a sickness, not as far to go to say she's ill, but it's unnatural in terms of the cycle, of the menstrual cycle. Huh? Speak up. Yes, then that will establish now the new nida, and the calculation will start from then. After the 18 days, it'll be 7 days, 11 days, and so it'll continue. That's why you can see the calculations. You have to have, it can be complicated, and all kinds of things can happen in the middle. And we're not going at all into the whole subject of staining. Does a stain render her impure or not? So that's why the Jewish women overall have just taken the stringent view in all of this, and it simplifies matters on one hand. The laws are many and complex. Focus on what we need to know here. So now let's look at zivus. We're looking now at zivus. This is in the 11 days. So when can it happen? It could happen from day 8, right? The first day after day 7, and through day 18. That's when the zivus category can happen. Now, what's the minor one? A zova ktana. So it's 1 or 2 days of bleeding, and then you have to have 1 clean day. That's all she has to have to count as 1 clean day, and she immerses, and she's now pure. Now, I want to tell you the language here. Zova ktana is called shemeres yoim. That's the expression of our sages. She watches a day. She needs shimur. She had a flow. She's got to watch that the next day is clean. Essentially, it's a good question. As long as by the next morning already, at some part of the morning, she hasn't seen the flow, she could really, in theory, immerse during the day. Because we say part of the day is like a whole day. but it's really one night and some part of the next day. But halachically, the sages said, don't do that, because she may then see it during the day and it'll cancel it. She should wait till night. And Nida has to always wait till night, but a Zava could immerse in the middle of that clean day. Like in the laws of mourning, we consider it's a 7-day mourning period, but we consider the seventh day in many other areas as well as part of the day is a whole day. They mourn in the morning, they sit low, and that's the end of the day. So in theory, it could be, but in practice, as I just said, not, because it could happen, so later in this day, it'll cancel your immersion. You may have lived together immediately, and that would have been, in retrospect, you're still impure. So wait till then you were kind of clear it stopped. So better to wait at night. But in theory, a Zovan, as opposed to a Nida, could immerse during the day. It has ramifications even for Nida today, because the Nida today is counting these extra days. These 7 clean days, she doesn't have to. So under certain circumstances, a Nida could also immerse during the day. It's dangerous to go at night, traveling, to get salted off, it's possible. Because she's really immersing way after Nida is required to, which is really as soon as the bleeding is over. So therefore, there are occasions, but the theoretical Nida, it's that night. But it also could be she saw blood till the very end. As long as it stopped before nightfall, mikveh. It's got to be at night. But I'm saying nowadays, since the woman today, every Nida is really going far beyond the Nida requirement, there could be a time where she's allowed to immerse during the day. And other leniencies as well. And I said she has to wait 5 days. She had a flow for 1 day or 2 days. She has to wait 5 before she starts the 7 clean days. And the circumstance she wait 4 days. A Kala waits 4 days. Because the reason for this 5-day business is something else entirely. It has to do with she may be still expelling seed from relationship with the husband she had prior to the onset of nidus, and that renders her impure. How long does it last within the body? It's really only 4 days or 5 days, so we can be lenient. In the case of a college, she didn't have relations before, we can be lenient. I'm touching on areas which have complex and lots of laws. Hope I didn't confuse, but we'll go further. So let's go to the bottom. The bottom, there's 2 critical things we're going to pick up now. So the Zava Gedola, again, the period of Zivus is these 11 days from day 8 through day 18. What makes a major Zava is 3 or more days of bleeding consecutively. Now comes this whole new law. She needs 7 clean days. And then she immerses and brings a korban, an offering. An offering that I guess it's a kind of a Thanksgiving thing, that because this is unnatural and kind of quasi-illness, and now she's immersed from her stage of impurity, she brings a korban. There are many other illustrations that in halacha, other types of tumah, once the kohen, for example, certain kinds of tumah has gone through the purification process, is also a korban. That's a common thing. But not in Nida, because her impurity is part of the natural cycle of life. There's no korban to be brought. But the major Zava does bring a korban. Now we need to know this. I hope we're clear. If there's any question here that I can clarify, please ask me. Well, you need to know now another piece of information. A korban can only be brought, just bear this in mind, it'll be relevant, can only be brought if it's scripturally mandated. The sages can impose all kinds of restrictions. The sages can say that one is impure, behave as if you're impure, rabbinically, even though Torah says you're not impure. So they can make restrictions, that's their mandate. But they cannot make someone bring an offering if it's not scripturally mandated, because it's not a sacred offering. You're not allowed to bring an animal on the altar unless it is for a specific Torah obligation. There's also Thanksgiving offerings and just gifts, but that's something else. You're giving it as a gift. In other words, if in our case here, if in a case which we'll soon address, the woman is not scripturally a Zava Gedola, a major zava, she can't bring a korban. It's got to be black and white scripturally. Whereas we could still apply to, the sages can say, you're not scripturally a major zava, but we'll treat you that way in certain respects, in terms of what you render impure. Clear? Just simple fact. To bring in, the sages can put restrictions, but they can't say, we'll make you bring a korban, even the Torah says you don't, because we're making a restriction, we're going to make you. A korban has to be brought, an offering has to be brought, only when it's scripturally mandated. Clear? Now, having said this, hope we'll bear this in mind. Let's look at now the argument between Beis Shammai and Hillel in the following case. A unique and interesting case. So it's page 651 in your text, chapter Yud. We see it there. Here's the case. So a woman sees a blood flow on day 11 of these middle days, which started day 8, and it goes all the way till day 18. So it's an 11-day period where she could be where this is the unnatural flow. She's either a minor, or a major. But here, so now there's a question like this. So she sees now on the last day of that window, as it were, to be a zova. In brackets, Shusoif Yemei Zoiv. This is the end of the Zoiv, the zova period. Ve'ein Yom Shela Acharav Mitztaref Ima Liziva. If she would see the next day, that's already nidus. That's already blood of nidus. It's considered natural, the natural menstrual flow. And they do not combine, even though there's no interruption. That's right. There's no interruption. They would not combine. And therefore, then her halachic status is immediately, once she sees a flow on day 18, which is now the new possibility for the natural flow, she's now in nida, and the two statuses don't combine, it's over. No, she only saw the day before. She only saw the blood the day before. The day before. So here's the debate. Yeah. So this is the story over here. This is what she did. She saw the blood the day before. That night, she didn't wait a day. She's supposed to wait a day. She didn't. It's a fact that happened. And the debate will be whether she has to wait a day or not. This is the core argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. In this particular case, since the next, even if she waits a day and then another day, she'll never become a Zava Gedola. It's not going to change her status. She will go immediately into Nida, which is stricter than Zava, because Zava just waits. As Zava Ktana is 1 day in immersion, and here the Nida is 7 days, so his status changes completely. So let's get this clear. So what happened was the day before, the day 18, the 11th day, or the night before, the 11th night, she had a flow. The next night, she went to the mikveh. She didn't wait a day. It's got to be the next day. Let's make it even clearer. Huh? Yeah, it was a 1 day flow. She had a flow in the morning, but the law is the Torah says you got to wait a full day, at least for part of the day. Let's make it clear. On day 11 in the morning, she saw. That night, she went to the mikveh. The blood stopped, but she didn't count the extra day. The question is, in this case, is she obligated to count to see that the next day should be clean and only then go to the mikveh? Or no, since she's now going into a new potential period, she'll never become the Zova Gedola. This will never go from the minor to the major because she's entered into a nidus. Therefore, the whole thing collapses. There's no need to wait a day. And therefore, scripturally, there's no need. The Torah wouldn't mandate wait a day. In this case, you can go to the mikveh at night, which you did, and all is fine and good. The sages said, don't do that because all agree that's creating confusion. We've got to be uniform, because then people think if you see a one-day flow in the middle period, you just, when it's over, you go to the mikveh at night, you don't have to wait. So the sages all agree, Shammai and Hillel impose the pure impurity dimension. Whatever she touches or sits on, as we learned previously, becomes ritually impure. But the korban is the question here. Is she obligated to bring, what korban we're talking about? We're talking about a case when she didn't do this in flagrant, not observing rabbinic law. She thought she's allowed to. So there's a sin offering that you bring. This is not the Zava Gedola's offering. This is a sin offering that a person brings when a person transgresses a law inadvertently. So the bottom line here is, did she inadvertently, does the Torah say she have to wait or not? That she should wait a day and only then go to the mikveh and be with her husband. So we're going to see now that Beis Hillel says, in this case, no. In this case, since the next day anyways is a whole new status of nidus, we'll soon go deeper. Therefore, the Torah itself says you don't have to wait a day. The sages said, you should, because they don't want to differentiate, so they will treat her like she's impure. But they will not say you can't bring a korban because you did not transgress inadvertently a Torah law. Whereas Beis Shammai says she did. The Torah law itself says you have, even though you're going to a new status, you still have to wait a day to see that there's no blood flow before you immerse in the mikveh. Let's see it inside, make it clearer, and get to the bottom line views. No, it's not a korban Zava Gedola. It's a korban chatas for transgressing inadvertently a Torah commandment. What's the issue at stake here? Is she obligated al pi Torah now, in this case, on the last day of her ziva period? Is she obligated to treat it like any other, like she had it in the middle, wait a day and only the end, or she could go in the morning, but let's say the end of the next day, immerse in the mikveh or not? Huh? She may not get her period. Should she wait or not? No, normally it's a month later. No, actually, normally it's a month later. It's just potentially after day 18, if you see blood then, that's a niddah. She wasn't expecting it, and maybe it never happened. It may never happen. There's a situation that happened. This is what happened, exactly. Okay, good. So this is what happened. On day 11, which is the last day of a ziva period, she saw blood. It stopped. She didn't wait the next day or even part of the next day to see that she was clean. That very day when the blood stopped, she immersed in the mikveh at night. She should have waited a day. Now the question is, the should have is rabbinically or scripturally? That's the argument. And she cohabitated with her husband. And therefore, so like this. So since she should have, let's before we get into rabbinic or scripturally, all agree Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, we classify her as ritually impure because she was with her husband. He's also ritually impure, and therefore things that they sit on or touch, whatever the law of the ziva applies, become ritually impure. Just in parenthesis now, you should know the time of the Beis Hamikdash. I want to tell you that a nida and a zava, same thing, this law. Anything they sit on, lie on, chair, bed, bedding, all becomes ritually impure. So the time of the Beis Hamikdash, people who lived near the Beis Hamikdash, who would go there often, they had two beds. They had like furniture, chairs that were designated, that were used during Ziva Nida period and during not Nida period. For most of the people, it made no difference. If you want to go to the Beis Hamikdash, you just go through the purification process and you'll go. But it was not uncommon because, or you could immerse the bed. A bed becomes impure, can be immersed, and a chair can be immersed, but it gets very complicated. They kept these separate things. If you're frequently going to the Beis Hamikdash, you don't want to get, by mistake, sit in it and become ritually impure, then you can't go. Kohanim, so I would imagine that Kohanim would have, they had, a certain furniture that were designated for the time when she was a nida or possibly a zava, and then a bed that was for the clean period. It becomes very complicated. Didn't affect the rest of the population. But let's not confuse ourselves. So what's the case over here? So what happened? What happened was she saw blood on day 11. Should she wait a day? Yes, but the question is, scripturally or rabbinically? Beis Hillel, is with the Machlekes series, Beis Hillel says only rabbinically. And Beis Shammai says scripturally. We're going to get to the source of it, potential, actual, soon see, what's the underpinning of their views, but let's first understand their view. So therefore, all agree, impure. Beis Shammai will say scripturally, Beis Hillel will say rabbinically imposed. Beis Shammai says, you transgress a scriptural law, which says you should wait a day. You did not wait a day. You have to bring a sin offering. Beis Hillel says no sin offering because she really didn't have to wait. Scripturally, a day, what she did was okay. Scripturally, it's just this rabbinical law imposed it not to cause confusion in a case where she would see that in the middle of the 11 days, you have to wait a day. But since you're back to back, the next day anyway, her status changes, you don't have to wait the day. You're going into Nida now. The whole law doesn't apply anymore. Because now the next day is day 18 or day 12 after the 11 period. So since the next day her status changes from Zava to Nida, in this case, there's no need to wait a day like the normal Zava has to do before she goes to the mikveh. That's in general. Now the Rebbe is going to give us much clearer to understand why not, what's the underpinning, do wait, don't wait. That's the issue here. And the scriptural obligation to wait. All agree rabbinically she should have. Let's see inside now. We didn't get now become clear. So she saw, this is the story that happened on the 11th day. In brackets, this is the end of the Ziva period, that 11-day window. The next day will not, in other words, she would see day 11 of that. And then 12 and 13, which means 18, 19, she doesn't become a Zova Gedoyla, which means she'd have to wait 7 days afterwards. She's a Nida, which is, there's no 7-day wait. They do not combine. Her status changes. So Beis Shammai says, Metamin, Mishkav, Moishe, V'chayavim B'korban. Both, they live together. So both husband and wife render everything they touch ritually impure. He says this scripturally. And they have to bring a korban. Because she should have waited a day. No difference, day 11 or in the middle of the Ziva period. And she didn't know, she didn't do this deliberately. So she has to bring a korban chatas, a sin offering. Yeah, rabbinically we'll penalize and we'll say whatever you touch is ritually impure so that people don't think that when it happens in the middle, or the next time it happens to her, I didn't go wait for a day, the next day on this occasion, so next time I won't again. Avoid confusion, typical rabbinic law, keep it uniform and straight. So the sages will impose impurity. But we can't say bring a korban. Because in this case, you don't have to wait a day. So what's the core argument here? Do you have to wait the next day or not? That explains. So now we're going to see it's all consistent with potential versus actual. What's the reason why a woman who sees blood on one day, not the end of the 11 days, in this 11-day period. What's the reason that she has to tzricha lispa yom toher? Why is it she has to count a day and see that there's no blood flow? In brackets, shemeres yom keneged yom, for a day that she sees blood, she's got to ascertain that the next day is blood-free. It's not some kind of independent law. You saw blood one day before you can be with your husband. You have to make sure that that there is one day clean and then you go to the mikveh. That's not what it is. But rather, because when she sees one day of blood, she's already in essence become a zova. So why should she waiting one day? Next page, why is she only counting one clean day as opposed to 7? If she would see 3 days in a row, top of 652, if she would see 3 days, she would have to count 7 days. Korban as a special korban, then not the korban we're talking about now, a special korban that happens when she's been, gone through this process and healed. Why do you make her wait? The fee, here comes the point. If she didn't see a 3-day flow, what happens is the ziva is not complete. It started, but didn't actualize. We want to see if it's going to continue or not. She's a zava already. But we want to know, is it going to be fully realized zava? That's a 3-day flow. And then she has to wait 7 days to make a korban. It's a whole business. Or it just remains kind of stymied. It remains only small zava ktana. That's the reason we're looking at it. We're waiting the next day. We want to see, is this going to continue or not? So therefore, Beis Hillel says like this. She saw on the 11th day. Seeing on this last day of the Ziva period, she'll never become a Zava Gedola. Because the next day, her halachic status changes and she moves into Nidus. And if she sees blood the next day, it's not considered Zava, it's considered Nida. There's no Korban, there's no 7 days you have to wait afterwards. Scripturally, we're talking now. 7 clean days, her status changes. She'll never become a major Zava. Why? Because any blood that's seen after this day that she saw, they're not Ziva. So Beis Hillel says, what's the point of telling her? She have to wait to see whether she's going to be a Zava Gedola. She never will become. No need to wait. Therefore, Torah says, in this case, there's no reason to wait. The blood stopped. Go to the mikveh that night and you're fine. And it could be she's not going to get her niddah the next day, or she will. That's immaterial. But scripturally, she did nothing wrong. That's Beis Hillel. The sages will say, to avoid confusion, we'll treat you like you and your husband are impure, things that you touch. You can't go to the Beis Hamikdash, whole business. But we can't make you bring a korban. You did no transgression. You did not transgress anything. There's no korban to be brought for. What? There's no possibility. So you didn't transgress anything, no korban. But why does Beis Shammai say she did? Well, by time of the Beis Shammai, but Shammai says she has to wait still another day, ideally 24 hours, but even till the next morning to see before she can go to the mikveh. Yeshloima. What's Beis Shammai's opinion? What did we say? The 11th day is all part of the Ziva period. And when she sees blood on that day, in essence, like the potential is there, in theory, for it to become a Zava Gedola. Now, the fact that the potential can never actualize because it hits a wall, Nida, doesn't validate that the potential was there then. And Beis Shammai is of the view the potential is already considered reality. So therefore, we're seeing obviously inside the words, but you're getting the idea. Therefore, Beis Shammai says she is a ziva, just like she would be a zava ktan, like in the middle. So she should wait a day. And Beis Hillel says no. In this case, she's not the whole law of the zava doesn't apply over here that you have to wait a day, because the whole reason you have to wait a day is to see whether it's going to actualize. And really, that's the reality. So since it's not it can never actualize into a major zova, potentials are considered nothing. It's not a reality. So the blood is over. Immersed in the mikveh, you did fine. What? That's the point. That's Beis Hillel's point. Since she could never be a Zava Gedola, the Zava Ktana, which is the potential for Zava Gedola, is not considered a Zava at all, period, not even a small Zava. The small Zava is only dealt with because we're going to see if it's going to actualize in the Zava Gedola. If it can never actualize, the whole Zava status doesn't begin. In this case, it can never actualize. Because Beis Hillel is of the view that in everything, how do we deal with something? What's the reality? Halachically, not its potential state, but its actual realized state. And Beis Shammai is of the view that the potential state is already reality. So what that it can't become the major? It's already in essence a Zava now. So she should have waited the day. So they're arguing, does the Torah laws say you are a Zava? That's the question here. Does Torah say in this case, day 11, you just finish, are you a Zava or not? Hillel says, Torah says you're not, because the minor Zava is merely the potential for the major. That's all it is. And since you can't become a major, you're not a minor. And Beis Shammai says you are a Zava, because there's the potential Zava, which is just as real. The Zava Ktana is just as real as the Zava Gedola. Because Beis Shammai says potential is just as real as actual. We don't differentiate. So Torah law would say, wait your day. Yep. Question?
Yeah. Didn't we say, sorry, I'll put on my video. Didn't we say at the beginning that a Zava Katana was defined as 1 day or 2?
Yes. So what's the question is?
So isn't 1 day considered a definition? By Hillel, you're saying it's not considered a definition. It's just a preamble to see if there's 2.
That's right.
Or
the
more.
whole Zava Katana business is only to see whether it's going to become the Zava Gedola. So what? See the days. Flow, blood flow, not blood flow. It's all part, really, it's identity in itself. It's a potential. It's an embryonic state. So we have to see, is it going to develop? If it can never develop, then the embryonic state is not considered to be an impure state, a real state that needs to be a day. All the Torah obligations, wait the day, then go to the mikveh, just simply don't apply. Your blood is over, go to the mikveh, you're done.
So you're saying the Raisa, even 1 day or one, like seeing, one spot sighting is the Raisa, not a definition.
That's the argument. Beis Shammai says midiraisa 1 day is also a zava, and Beis Hillel says 1 day is not a zava. 1 day, 2, 3 are the potential for zava gedola that we have to see. The Torah is making sure. Let's be sure that this is not going to end up into a Zava Gedola. But if you reach a case where it can never end up as Zava Gedola anyway, so the whole Torah law doesn't talk, doesn't address it. And as soon as the blood is over, immerse, and you're fine. Let's see, right? Clear? That's the core of the argument. Let's see inside the text. Beis Shammai says, no, even though it's the last day of Zava, and you'll never become a Zava Gedola, they still say the Torah says you've got to wait a day. You shouldn't have gone to the mikveh that night, which is why you have to bring this, this sin offering for atonement. Yesh loima, kiv and Beis Shammai, kiv and sheyem yud aleph yemei haziva, since it's still part of the meiziva. Harei hariyah de yom yud aleph yeshba. The seeing on this last day 11 has mitzat atzma itself, bekoyach the potential. Looking at it. Shetia Zava Gedola should be a Zava Gedola. The reality is it won't be, because tomorrow is a different status. Looking at you now, is your potential real? A reality. What's the reason why she can't become a major Zava? It's because it's tomorrow, and not the Ziva days, but would start the new status in Yidda. Nimtza. What does it come out? The whole problem here with her not becoming a Zava in actual is the actualization of it, not the potential. In order that the potential of seeing 1 day Yava B'Poel should be actualized, you need 3 days, at least you need two more additional days, and then that seed, that potential becomes actual as Zava Gedola. In other words, they see, Beis Shammai sees it as two things. There is but potential and actual are actually it's one thing. The potential is real and the actual is real. And for Beis Hillel, only the actual is real. And the potential is not considered a Zava, period. Are you in essence a Zava? Halachically, when there's only 1 or 2 flows. Beis Hillel says, let's wait and see. And you're not considered a Zava now. Beis Shammai says, you are a Zava. You are a Zava. But you're a minor Zava. But you have the category of a Zava. And then when it's actualized, that's even bigger and greater. You got to wait the 7 days. But are you or are you not? Halachically, min Torah, a Zava in Zava Ktana. What does Zava Ktana mean? So according to Beis Hillel, Zova Ketana simply means the potential for Zova Gedola. According to Beis Shammai, Zova Ketana is in essence a Zova. So there's the minor and there's the major. But both are valid. The potential and actual are both valid. Let's just finish the text. I see you have a question. So this is Beis Shammai's view. The potential when she sees the blood in the ziva period, where it's day 11 or the days prior, that bleeding per se is the potential for a zava gedola. Doesn't matter when it happens, and therefore she has the status of a zava. And therefore, from the Torah perspective, she should have waited a day. She didn't know. So bring it a sin offering as an atonement. Valpizer comes out, Pluktas Beisham Beis Hillel. This argument of Shammai and Hillel, Baroya Dam Yud Aleph, if she sees on the 11th day, the last day of the Ziva period, does the Torah itself consider that as Zava and say, wait a full clean day before you immerse, or at least part of the next day? Hili is consistent with their views. Do we follow the potential or the actual? Now, question? Huh? Well, so zero in on your question. We'll try and answer it. Is there such thing as a Zava Gedola? Of course. What do you mean? That's it. That's if she sees in those middle 11, if there's in those middle 11 days, she sees 3 days of blood, she says Zava Gedola, and she has to wait 7 clean days. There was nothing before. The last day she gets it, and then it's a brick wall when her status changes to Nida. Is that a Zava or not? This is, but that's the question. But the question, that's the question. This is what you're not grasping. To convey it now is, they're really arguing on the status of a Zava Ketana. What does Zava Ketana mean? According to Beis Hillel, Zava Ketana is a wait and see. It really is not the status of a Zava. Only if there is 3 full days, then she's a Zava Gedola. And how do we have to see? Is there going to be blood uninterruptedly in 3 full days? Pardon? I don't know. Both views make sense. It depends. The question, no, well, you could argue each one is valid because Beis Shammai says, Beis Hillel's view makes perfect sense too. He says the real Zava it's an illness. What's defined the illness? Not a 1 day flow. It's 3 days. We just have to ascertain, is this what it is? Could be, could not, but could be. That's Hillel's view. He considers the minor Zava to be the potential of a major Zava. And therefore Hillel says, if it can never become the major Zava, then it's no Zava at all. In this case, we do know, because it's day 11. And if she sees blood tomorrow, she's a Nida. So we know. So therefore Hillel says, seeing the blood now on day 11, you know Zava, because you can never become a Zava Gedola. That's the whole core. And Beis Shammai says no. That it's not like that the minor Zava is a wait and see to Zava Gedola. It's not. She is a Zava. A Zava needs 1 day. A Zava Gedola needs 7 days. But she's in essence a Zava as soon as she sees blood during this time, irrespective of whether it can develop into a Zava Gedola. Therefore, she saw on the 11th day, before you go to the mikveh, you got to wait a day. No difference between now and the previous days. So this is the core issue. Is Zava Ketana the potential of Zava Gedola? That's the view of Hillel, because the view of Shammai that no, it's the potential is just as real as the actual. And therefore the Torah says you have to wait a day. Huh? Beis Shammai is saying, can it? Yeah. That's right. Yeah. As long as it can, it's a Zava, Torah-wise. Beis Hillel says, will it? It won't. So therefore, the whole status falls. And the obligation to wait a day doesn't apply. Well put. It gets easier after this. We're much easier. Yeah. Now we're going to split hairs further, actually. It's almost the other side. It's the same point from the other angle. It's very interesting. Yeah, which we're going to explore further. It gets really fascinating. Okay, Shkoya, thank you for coming.
One more question I have.
Yeah.
If this were to happen.
Oh, Dave, when did you join us?
Be well.
Good seeing you. I didn't see you before.
Yeah, be well.
Okay, bracha.
Okay, if this were to happen at any other day during the 11 days, right? Like 9, 10, 11, whatever. So Hillel would say you have to wait to see if it happened Azava Gedola, like if it's going to be 3 days. And
if it's 9, 10,
Shammai
11,
would say
9, 10, 11,
no,
she's already she's Azava Gedola. All agree.
Right. So, but Hillel would say you have to wait to see 3 days. Shammai says it happened 1 day. Let's say it happened only 1 day. Right? What we're saying is actually Hillel's being more stringent, which is not usually his case. During those days, you have to, like, he's keeping her from being with her husband extra days.
Nobody's arguing that. No, there's no difference there. No. Which case are you saying they would argue?
I'm saying potentially, if it wasn't the 11th.
Give me the scenario. Give me the scenario.
The scenario is she has a sighting on, let's say, day 10. Yeah. Or, no, not day 10. Let's say it's out of the 11 days. So we're going to say day 5 out of the 11 days.
Yeah.
Okay. So Hillel would say, you've got to wait to see if it's a Gedola.
The Torah said this. No one argues here. You wait 1 day. If 1 day goes by, no blood, mikveh, done. All opinions. The question is, what is this waiting period? How do we define it? Mm-hmm. For Hillel is, we just want to make sure, you got to go to the mikveh, all agree, and it's the next, you got to wait a day. The waiting period is to ensure that it doesn't become, to be ascertained as Zava Gedola, which means you have to wait 7 days.
So Shammai would say the same thing.
Practically it's the same thing, except for Beis Shammai, when you waited that day, you were a Zava. The core debate is a Zava Katana considered a Zava period in its own right, or is it the potential of Zava Gedola? For Shammai, it's Zava. So there's Zava A, Zava B. And for Hillel, it's only, the Torah is telling us to see, make sure that it doesn't become the actual Zava Gedola.
Right. So what I'm asking is, if that were the case, let's say day 5, and Hillel says we have to wait to see if it's going to be in potential, then, and it doesn't become in potential, it remains like technically a Zava Katana, then she could have gone earlier to be Tahor.
How could she go earlier? How could she go earlier?
Because according to Shammai, she can go after waiting a day or 2 days if there's a day in between.
Everybody, that's a Torah. No one disagrees there. If a flow in the middle, the next day there's no flow, mikveh, and it's over. All agree. Mm-hmm. All agree. It's just what is over?
So what's Hillel waiting for?
What is over? Hillel says you were never a Zava. Because the real, it just means you were never a Zava. And Shammai says the Zava Ktana is over. They're debating what is over.
Okay.
They're debating whether the 1, 2, 3 days is merely the potential for the actual, or it is in itself in its own right Zava. So all agree it's over after 1 day, but what is over?
So it's a question of defining it.
The question of definition. And well, it's in theory. What difference does it make? In the middle 11 days, there's absolutely no difference. The only argument is the last day. Because the last day can never become the Zava Gedola. So Hillel says that if it can't become, Zava, period. You don't need to wait a day. And Shammai says that since the potential is as real as the actual, you are a Zava Ktana on that last day. You should have waited a day. So bring a korban.
And anyway, you don't need to bring a korban if you're Zava Katana.
Never. No, the korban here is only because she should have waited a day, because it's not because of the Zava Gedola, not because of the Niddah thing. It's transgressing a Torah law inadvertently. You never bring a korban to Zava Ketana, no. The korban of Zava Gedola has nothing to do with the korban here. That's having recovered from an illness, like a Thanksgiving. Here it's the question of transgression. She didn't wait the next day. Did she transgress scriptural law or not? Hillel says no, because the whole Zava Ketana is merely the waiting game. Since there's no point in the waiting game here, because she can't become a Zava Gedola, she doesn't have the status of a Zava. She didn't have to wait the day. And Beishamai says, no, the potential, when the Torah says wait that day, it's not simply to see whether. It's because this is already a kind of a Zava. So in the middle days, they're not arguing in practice. It's the designation that they're arguing. Gotcha. And that designation now comes to a practical conclusion on the final day. And it comes down to, yes, korban, no korban. In terms of being ritually impure, Shammai says there. Scripturally, Hillel says that. Rabbinically, the practical doesn't change. But do we make her bring a korban chatos for a sin that was done inadvertently? She didn't know, doesn't know this law. Shammai says she transgressed. Hillel says she didn't transgress. Why didn't she transgress according to Hillel? She's no Zava now, because the whole 1, 2, 3 are only potential states, and this could never actualize, so she's no Zava. And she, the potential state, that's a real Zava.
And the only thing that is different.
Yeah, we got it?
Yeah.
It's subtle, but I see you got it. Yeah?
We're good.
All right, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Oh, that's it? Oh. When are we continuing?
Next Sunday. It's a show.
Oh, have to wait. Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.